Hi, I'm back with another reading of a wonderful Tumblr post. I might make this into a thing. I've seen other women read passages from their favorite feminist literature or zines and stuff, and I think that's so awesome. And we have this medium to share different kinds of media, to share the written word on videos or audio recordings to extend their reach, I think is a really useful tool. So I'm going to read this post here. Let's see. It's from a Tumblr called, oh boy, Rakastikari. I am likely pronouncing that incorrectly, but I will of course link it in my description of the video below. So it is also an anonymous message that the blogger received and then responded to. The message reads, "While I agree with you with regards to comp het, I have a question. I understood it to mean lesbians who were raised to believe that there was nothing outside heterosexuality, or told things like even het women think penises or PIV is gross. That doesn't make you gay. It's totally normal to not want sex with men or to think your best friend is beautiful or recognize beauty and attractiveness in other women because you've been raised to recognize and copy for men. What should this be called, if not comp het? For context, that's how I was raised. My formative years were spent with the only options I had was either to marry a man and have kids or die alone and miserable, to which I spent years as young as 8 trying to decide if I wanted a companion who would take care of me but rape me periodically, or if I'd rather have to take care of myself and live and die alone with my cats and have to fend for myself all alone, and spent years attempting to romanticize that. It wasn't until I was at least 15 before I heard the word gay on the news and was given a single-sentence explanation before a new topic came on the news. And with my ADHD, very quickly forgotten before I was able to process options outside of heterosexuality. My mother is also asexual, and told me, as she believed, sex with men is inherently awful, often painful, and gross. No one actually likes penises, you just kind of deal with it, and men themselves are not nearly as visually appealing as women. Women have a lot more fashion options and ways of dressing that make us more interesting to look at, so it's totally normal to find women more interesting than men, especially since society raises us to scrutinize women's appearance, to recognize what's attractive and what isn't, to copy it for men. Men are also incompetent with chores and general life, so of course living with another woman as a roommate would be much more appealing than living with a man. Raised on all this, it wasn't until the next time I saw a reference to homosexuality at age 19. It was the back of a Utena manga with the words, her girlfriend, on it, that I actually started to think about that as an option or as a concept at all. Literally, my first thoughts reading that was, that's not right. Girls can't have girlfriends. Only men can. Right? So the term compulsory heterosexuality seemed to fit me well. How else could I have thought I was straight even though I had been terrified of PIV since I was a small child and never really wanted to marry a man or really have anything to do with them? How else could I have thought myself straight if not for the grooming of heteropatriarchy and my own mother's ignorance? Comp het seemed like the perfect word for that, and I know I'm not the only one who grew up like that. And while I agree with its horrible origin and current use, it shouldn't still be used, but I feel like this type of experience should really have a name. The response. Most lesbians probably thought that's what comp het was about before they properly read the essay for themselves and really thought through the implications of what Adrienne Rich was saying. In the interest of fairness, I don't disagree with everything she wrote in her essay. She was right when she said that historically, people's perceptions of homosexuality have often erroneously subsumed female homosexuality with male homosexuality, and discussion of homophobia was largely centered on gay men's experience of it and ignored or erased lesbians' experience of it. She was right to acknowledge that heterosexuality is institutionalized and imposed upon lesbians. But the analysis she made failed on multiple fronts. Here's the thing. If you look at the list of characteristics of male power she expounds upon, denying women their sexuality, forcing their male sexuality upon women, exploiting women's labor, having control of women's children, physically confining women, selling women as objects in male transactions, cramping women's creativity, and depriving women of education, you'll notice that almost all of the examples she gives are these aspects of male power, are examples of women's expressions, are examples of women's oppression in general, not specifically lesbian experiences of these forms of oppression. She treats lesbian, bisexual, and heterosexual women's experiences of oppression under patriarchy more or less homogeneously, as though all women are affected in the same way by these things. She goes on to say that, quote, to take the step of questioning heterosexuality as a preference or choice for women, and to do the intellectual and emotional work that follows, will call for a special equality of courage in heterosexual identified feminists, but I think the rewards will be great. A freeing up of thinking, the exploring of new paths, the shattering of another great silence, new clarity in personal relationships, end quote. So she uses the oppression of women by men as a reason to encourage heterosexual women to question whether they should continue choosing men, rather than opening up a conversation about how patriarchy impacts lesbians specifically and how lesbians can organize together to fight their own oppression. I just find it ironic that Rich critiques the way that mainstream academics and gay activists center gay men's lives and experiences, yet in penning this essay on, quote, compulsory heterosexuality and lesbian existence, end quote, she herself fails to center lesbian lives and experiences. I agree with you, Anon, that lesbians need and deserve a term to describe our own experiences with heterosexism and homophobia. Comp het just isn't a good one because it's polluted by its homophobic origins. I've seen some lesbians criticize the terminology itself, for the word compulsory means mandatory and implies a lack of choice, so it only makes sense to say something is compulsory if you don't have a choice. Compulsory heterosexuality is confusing and incoherent when it's used broadly to refer to so many very different things, from a lesbian choosing to get a beard boyfriend to avoid lesbian rumors, to a lesbian being outed and then having her parents force her to marry a man. In the first scenario, the lesbian made a conscious choice to access hetero-passing privilege to spare her reputation. In the second scenario, the lesbian has no access to such privilege because she has no choice and will face rape and abuse from a homophobic man. Some lesbians have suggested and prefer to use for themselves the surprisingly obvious and concise term, lesbian oppression. It specifically centers lesbian experiences, and as a bonus, it is therefore more difficult for non-lesbians to co-opt. An honest analysis of lesbian oppression examines how male supremacy and heterosexism affect lesbians for being lesbians, murder by homophobic men, corrective rape, imprisonment in mental institutions, rejection of asylum seekers who are attempting to escape forced marriages in their home countries, abuse and harassments by bi or het men and women, stigmatization and slander as predatory deviants by bi or het men and women, and conversion therapy tortures that are practiced on lesbians specifically are all types of lesbian oppression that need to be talked about more.